Welcome to Overproof. This week on the show, I have Jason Williams. Jason is based over in Sydney. He is the director at Housemade Hospitality. According to their website, they have 13 venues, TBC. Jason started at 13 years old as a pizza maker, and he had the rare insight to start hospitality as a career from a young age rather than falling into it. Jason, you have reached a point in your career that the majority of hospitality can only dream of, to be completely honest. What characteristics do you think that you personally have that have contributed to this success in your career? We're starting off with a big question.
Yeah, wow, straight to it. I love it. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's big fan of your work, so it's pretty cool to be on your podcast. Just wanted to say that. And before we go back to talking about me, honestly, I think I've spoken about this before. This might be an unexpected, I guess, trait to have, but adaptability, I think, is good for longevity. And also being able to adapt to different environments and different teams and also different styles of hospitality businesses. Like I've worked in nightclubs, pubs, cafes, restaurants, cocktail bars, of course. And so being adaptable to work in different environments and different teams, I think that's steered me well, but also being adaptable and working with different individuals and leading teams that require different things means you have to be adaptable. So yeah, it's not really creative or glamorous, but adaptability might be one trait that I've got that's helped me in my career.
When you say adaptability, do you mean like changing yourself to fit into different situations, or like what do you mean specifically?
It probably is a lot to do with communication and the way that you kind of use your emotional intelligence. So for example, in a nightclub environment, there's a different style of personality that might work there and a different team dynamic. So I don't think it's about kind of changing yourself. It's about adapting to your around you and adapting to the people that you're working with, because ultimately individuals have different things that drive them. They have different desires, wants and needs. And so being able to empathize with what someone else is trying to get out of their job or out of their service or out of that interaction with a guest, and then adapting the way that you communicate with them to get a good outcome is probably what I mean the most. But also just on a personal level, just physically and mentally, there's a huge difference when you go to work at a cafe compared to going to work at 10 p.m. to do a nightclub shift. And I've done both at the same time.
Oh, gross.
For a big period of my life. Yeah. I remember when I was in my early 20s, I'd work until 5 a.m. and then drive a couple of hours back to my hometown and then work in a restaurant that evening and then work in the cafe the next day. So I think for someone who works in hospitality, it has to be adaptable and being able to and even in service, the strongest team members can work on the bar, but then they can also take a section and work on the floor. They can serve as a pass master. They can work as a host if they need to. So yeah, that adaptability is different in interpretation, but certainly I think it's an important trait to have.
Yeah, I agree. I guess if you're adaptable, you're willing to go out and try more different roles. And so then you can figure out what you're really good at as well.
Yeah. And another thing that just sprung to mind, Sarah, is I've just worked my fucking ass off.
Yeah, okay. It sounds like it.
That's it. That's actually, that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And it's relevant. Everyone needs to set boundaries. My wife tells me I need to set better boundaries, but you know what? You got to work your ass off. That's pretty straightforward sometimes.
Yeah. I could see your brain ticking over just then. I think that's so true. I mean, most people that I've talked to on this podcast, if you go back into specifically their early 20s, they're the type of people that had this crazy drive that definitely overworked themselves to the point that most people will be like, that's not healthy. But they've all found great success on the other side of that in their late 20s or later even.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'd agree with that. I think it's really important now that people do set boundaries for health and wellness reasons, relationship reasons, pursue other pursuits, whether it's artistic or education. Totally agree with that. But the cold hard truth of it is quite often you might not kind of achieve your goals or might not progress in your career if you don't have a bit of hustle. And if you want to do 38 hours and go home and not think about anything else, that's great. That's awesome. But there's a chance that you might not progress to the level of your potential, because you might not have a bit of that hustle or a bit of that mongrel or work ethic or whatever you might refer to it as. And I think it might be an uncomfortable conversation to have sometimes in this day and age, because it's hard. We pay all of our team for extra time and time in lieu and all that kind of stuff. It's good. But yeah, I mean, like you said, if you talk to people around my vintage, quite often they'll say, because they made they'll make some sacrifices in their 20s, and they probably were underpaid, and they probably worked too much, but it's worked out.
Yeah, 100%. Last time we spoke, so for everyone listening, we had a little chat maybe a month or two ago now. It was a while back, just to get an idea of your previous experience. You said that you purposefully went into hospitality rather than like falling into it like most of us, me included, did. What is it about the industry that had you convinced at 13 years old, when you were working in a pizza shop, that hospitality was for you?
There's a couple of things. I grew up in a place called Coolum Beach, and it's a beautiful kind of coastal town community, and it's got a good tourism industry. And particularly we had a resort there it was a Hyatt Regency resort at the time. Mm-hmm. So I started working there after my Eagle Boys pizza shop days. And yeah, I really enjoyed the kind of like the combination of using your head, using your heart, and using your hands at the same time. And so, yeah, that's where I really got into more structured, traditional hospitality. My extended family historically have been in pubs and in hospitality, from my grandfather to my uncles and different other family members. And so spending school holidays in some of those pubs in regional Queensland also really excited me, and I thought it was just really interesting. And particularly my uncle was a bit of an inspiration, David. And the third thing is the movie Casino. Weirdly, I was right into like organized crime and gangster films like Goodfellas and The Godfather, but particularly the movie Casino just had this like glamorous edginess to it. I didn't know whether I wanted to be like a professional gambler or a pit boss or the general manager of the casino or the bartender. I'm not sure, but I was really drawn to that movie and that world that was created in there. So that also inspired me to go into hospitality.
I love that. You kind of have the persona of somebody that could be a gangster, actually. That's hilarious. Was pubs seen as a good job? Like when you went into hospitality, were your family supportive of that?
Really? They weren't unsupportive, which I think might be a common thing for people that do go into the industry or fall into the industry. I think for my mother, we don't, my family or my parents don't, they don't come from academia. They didn't go to university. They also worked their ass off. And so I think they really, because they worked so hard, they maybe would have preferred if I went to university and did more of a traditional corporate career or, I don't know, something, not hospitality. And I think also they had dabbled in hospitality. Like my parents managed a motel for a period of time. And obviously, through my grandparents and uncles and aunties that were privy to the industry and probably saw, in the 1980s and 1990s, regional pubs in Queensland is not like the fancy cocktail bars that we talk about today. So they didn't try to dissuade me for sure, but they would have preferred to do something else. Absolutely. But there's an interest. There's an interesting story there because as a bartender into your 30s and not being great with your communication, and they get drip fed these bits and pieces. What are you doing? I'm working in nightclubs in Brisbane. They're working in cocktail bars on Brunswick Street, Melbourne. I don't know. I probably could speculate saying that they didn't have full confidence that I was really creating a career or carving out a future for myself, because just the nature of that lifestyle and that job probably breeds a little bit of like concern. But then, once you start getting your face in magazines and you start getting different jobs and you move up the ladder a bit, they started to feel a little bit more comfortable. And then I launched a gin brand with my business partners, and it literally has my face and my name on it. So I think that was the point where they really went, you know what, that was a good move going into the hospitality and drinks industry.
Yeah. Okay. So I think my parents were kind of the same, to be completely honest, because especially in my early 20s, I was definitely like overworking, drinking way too much. And then when I started taking it more seriously towards my later 20s, they were like, oh, okay, this is actually okay as a career. It just took a bit of persuading.
Oh, that's a great point. I think it's the extracurricular activities working in the hospitality industry that probably caused my parents to have a little bit of concern
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
they knew that
for
I
sure.
already liked having a good time anyway.
Yeah. You've had a pretty varied career. So you've worked in bars, you've had a gin brand, you've worked in consulting, and now you've got Housemade Hospitality. I just want to give the audience some context before we get into your consulting experience. What was your experience in the industry before that?
Yeah, so I got into the industry out of high school, really, in Queensland. Worked in nightclubs and restaurants, and then moved to Melbourne. I was in Melbourne for, I'm going to say, almost 10 years, and working in small bars, cocktail bars, restaurants. And during that period of time, I started, I guess, making a name for myself because I was entering cocktail competitions and just attending as many events as possible, and really immersed myself in the kind of cocktail bar scene and industry. I was running Rum Club and other bits and pieces like that. It's that when I started to have other opportunities presented to me for like part-time brand ambassador positions and bar manager positions. And so I kind of just grew, really unintentionally, by the way, but grew my career like that. Then I got headhunted to Sydney to take on the kind of a group bars manager role for a company called the Keystone Group, which doesn't exist anymore, but the venues still exist. So it was a collection of restaurants, bars, and clubs. And I did that for over 4 years. And again, then kind of got headhunted to a company in Singapore called Proof and Company. And the business model for Proof and Company was have a distribution business, which was the main business, importing spirits and liqueurs and glassware and whatnot, but then supporting that through a bar consultancy. And so we started off just doing kind of ad hoc, free of charge consultancy, like do cocktail lists and training and choose some glassware or help out with some layout design or whatever it might be. And it snowballed to a point where it's a legitimate beverage consultancy. And then I got headhunted to join the team in 2015. And then I was based in Singapore running that team and running those projects for over 8 years. And that was really my core bar consultancy phase of my career up until that point. And so we did amazing things. Like, I'm really proud looking back at the projects that we worked on and the success that those projects achieved. Some of the highlights would have been the Raffles Hotel. So we opened 4 venues for the reopening of the Raffles Hotel, including the Long Bar, and we got to kind of take apart the Singapore Sling and put it back together to try and make it a bit better. And other projects such as Atlas, which is really dear to my heart. And yeah, dozens and dozens and dozens of other projects, mostly hotel bars all throughout Asia Pacific and specifically in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to talk to you a little bit about consulting because I know that you have some feelings about consultants, as do most people, I believe. If someone is thinking of becoming a consultant or is currently a practicing consultant, what do they need to know, in your opinion, to be successful versus be a bit of a hack? Nicely.
Yeah. I guess maybe I'll qualify my answers, plural, with that. I think there is a really exciting opportunity. There seems to be a gap in which there's an opportunity between operators, and that can be global listed 5-star hotel groups, or it could be kind of independent bars down the road or cafes, restaurants, what have you. All throughout that spectrum of hospitality, F&B businesses, there is a genuine need for expertise and specialization and external support. So there's definitely an opportunity there, which I think is really important and really exciting for our industry because it provides another potential career pathway for a bartender. And I'm quite proud of the fact that I've achieved some success. And in the context of the conversation earlier, my parents are proud of me now because I started off I didn't go to university. I started off washing dishes and I started off clearing glasses, and now I've done some cool stuff, and I'm on a good wicket, and I have had unique jobs, but those jobs are out there, and I think the industry can evolve to create more of those jobs and more of those career pathways. And one of those pathways is certainly consultancy, and it can be small-time consultancy or it can be large-scale consultancy, whether it's working on a drinks list or working on master planning for a whole precinct. There's real opportunities there, which I think is fantastic. for our industry. When I say industry, I mean bartender industry. So yeah, really think it's a great opportunity. But I think there's some cowboys out there, and I think they might end up doing a disservice to this whole notion of bar consultancies becoming a legitimate business model and a proper career pathway. So I think there's risk on both sides of that dynamic, client and consultant. What would I say to the consultants that are just starting out? To protect yourself, and protect yourself by doing a good job and acting with integrity. I think consultants, particularly in my time in Asia, got a really bad reputation because they'd implement some really fancy cocktails and really unrealistic serves, and then kind of just leave and kind of wash their hands of it, never to be seen again, taking a heap of cash at the same time. And that program would most likely fall over after a couple of weeks because they weren't provided with the training or the training materials or the kind of aftercare service or quality control check-ins. So I would say take a relationship view to consultancy. Don't take a single project base. You might be keen for that cash, but really try to think of it as long-term. Even if you never work with that person again, this industry is small enough that you'll probably cross paths again. And if you do a bad job in a consultancy context, you'll really put a bad taste in the client's mouth. So I guess my first bit of advice is really act with integrity and take a relationship approach as opposed to just a single project approach. To be really clear with the scope of work. We all get in trouble with this. Every big time consultants with dozens of employees or a single operator, they come across this problem. Be really super clear with the scope of work and set really clear expectations. And then also identify what are the consequences if the client asks for extra work that's outside of the scope or outside of the time frame. Just be really clear and agree to that before signing on to a project. So in 3 months after you've signed on and they come back to you and say, can you please do us a whole new cocktail list for our bar upstairs, or we want to launch breakfasts, can you do a smoothie menu for us? And you say, well, I'm not being paid for that. There's no ambiguity. So be really clear with the scope of work, be really clear with the fee structure, be really clear with what the on cost will be if it's outside of scope. At the risk of rambling, is that helpful?
No, keep going. Yeah. That's very helpful. I'm aware of in the past couple of years. And I see a lot of them really struggling to get their first client or to get their name out there. Is there any advice you'd have for them in that respect?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do believe having a really sharp suite of collateral, whether that's just it sounds a little bit boring and corporate, but having a really nice introduction presentation deck of some sort with really high quality imagery, whether it's venue shots, cocktail shots, kind of service in situ shots. So having a really sharp, polished brand and illustrated presentation deck which showcases your capabilities, who you are, what you've done. I think that's a starting point. Just having a really sharp bit of collateral to provide people. And if I look back at the proof model, it was really grown organically by demonstrating value to the business. And this is not going to be for everyone, and this might not be reasonable for a lot of people, but it's really demonstrating what you can do. That could take the form of, jumping behind the bar on a Friday night. That could take the form of sending over a sample menu without recipes, without costings, without supply details, but just demonstrating how you can show value, because that kind of does two things. It showcases your expertise and your creativity, and it showcases how you can add value to their business. But it also demonstrates your commitment to the relationship. And like I mentioned before, I really feel like this consultancy direction is relationship driven. There's deliverables, there's quality, there's fees, etc. There's metrics of success, whether it's revenue or accolades, but long-term success in the consultancy world is based on relationships. And so potentially to get your foot in the door, to demonstrate how serious you are, would be to potentially offer up a sample menu, which they're not going to be able to implement really without you, or jump in there and do some training with the team, or jump behind the bar for a few hours. It seems pretty basic, but that could be a way to show your commitment, but also show how good you are.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome advice. For when you started with Proof, you guys didn't call yourself consultants, right? You went by another name. Why was that?
Yes, we were spirits evangelists.
Okay.
And I think
why?
let me explain that. Proof & Company legitimately was disruptive in Singapore and then more broadly Southeast Asia at the time. The team opened up 28 Hong Kong Street, and in 2011, 2012, it was Jigger and Pony in their original site, 28 Hong Kong Street, and then another bar called the Cufflink Club, which were really the best international style cocktail bars in the city. There were other cocktail bars and there already was a bit of a cocktail culture, but it was probably a little bit more kind of 90s, 2000s in style. So those bars opened and Proof opened up 28 Hong Kong Street, and it was quite disruptive and it kind of shook up the scene a little bit. Off the back of that, they created Proof and Company. Again, disruptive in the spirits distribution part of the space in terms of the customer service, the deliveries, the portfolio. We're talking, Ford's Gin and Sipsmith Gin and Michter's Bourbon and St. George Spirits and craft or more niche products that just weren't seen in that market at the time. The customer service, the deliveries, all that was just super disruptive. Part of that disruption and taking more of a innovative or creative approach was to not use the term consultants. And we actually even didn't use the term sales. It was very much relationship driven. And so the salespeople were called client relationship managers, which is not too crazy. And the consultants, including myself, were spirits evangelists, because we were very much relationship driven and very much community driven too. And so, because in other industries, consultancy can be a bad term. You generally might only get consultants into your business if your business is under extreme financial pressure. In our industry, you bring in a consultant to elevate a business, not just to save a business. And so in the corporate context, consultants is a bit dry, it's a bit boring. Basically, consultants in to save you money or to restructure. We didn't want to be that perceived as that kind of consultants. We wanted to be cool and dynamic and community minded and edgy. So we used the term spirits evangelist because we were also kind of representing spirits portfolios and evangelizing for our industry. So it really made a lot of sense at the time. And then in later years, we needed to kind of mature and evolve as a business. So we adopted the consultancy terminology because I was just so tired of having to explain this to every new consultancy client that we got.
I think what's interesting about that is that not necessarily that you weren't called consultants to start, but the fact that by calling yourself spirits evangelists, you guys embody what you're the reason that you've called yourself that, right? It really drives home that culture that you're trying to have in the business, rather than calling yourself consultants and just trying to embody that culture anyway. I think that little tweak and that name change has a huge benefit for the vision of the company. Man, I was trying to string that together in my head.
Yeah, I think Spencer Forhard and Paul Gaby, who co-founded the company, they would absolutely love what you just said, because I believe that would be pretty much their intent when they came up with those terms.
Yeah, cool. So after 8 years at Proof, it was 8 years? Sorry? Yeah. You had...
Yeah, a bit over 8 years. Did a little bit of part-time afterwards.
Yeah, okay. So you had worked on some of the world's 50 best venues. You had some James Beard win it, and then Proof went into administration. So you guys would have lost the team, jobs overnight. I'm sure that there was money lost. How did that affect you?
Well, I actually was not part of the business at that time. So yeah, okay. I left Proof in a meaningful way in 2023. Okay. And then in 2021, I co-founded a hospitality group here in Sydney called Housemade Hospitality, which hopefully we get to. So I left Proof and relocated back to Sydney. Then Bobby Carey took over Proof creative team. I was also kind of co-running 28 Hong Kong Street at the time, but that kind of the team took that over. So yeah, I'd been out of the business for over 2 years. I was a shareholder, still a shareholder, I'm not sure, but there was I was a shareholder. It's traumatic for a lot of people. So Proof pulled out of mainland China first because of kind of economic conditions and, the kind of efficiencies there. And then Proof Australia, unfortunately, went under. They went into voluntary administration, which was a big one. Australia was the biggest market and, it was a profitable business a couple of years before that. So, that was a big kick. And then maybe about 6 months later, they did a big review and they were going through a financial restructure, but some of the shareholders didn't want to participate, and so they couldn't keep trading, and so they had to wrap up shop. And so, like I said, I wasn't there It would have been extremely traumatic for everybody involved. People lost a lot of money all through the chain. Everyone from the original founders to investors to supplier partners to team members, all kinds of vendors, shareholders, etc. So yeah, it was really traumatic. But like I said, I wasn't part of it. I wasn't there. I got a call up from my, one of the co-founders of Proof, Paul Gaby, and said, look, all the assets are being set for liquidation as part of the legal process. And Proof Creative is the consultancy arm. And that's still a business. There's still clients. There's still kind of work to be done. And yeah, Bobby Carey decided to start his own consultancy, which I think he'd been thinking about, which is great. And so he asked me to step in an interim capacity. So to answer your question, it was pretty shit, but I actually wasn't there. I wasn't part of it.
Yeah, okay.
I kind of got brought back in on a part-time basis, middle to end of last year, just to help out because of all the disruption and people had to get laid off effective immediately, and then other people were staying on, but to work on the consultancy part of the business, but there was just a lack of structure and stuff. So yeah, pretty sad for everyone involved, particularly the people that have been working on it for 10 years plus and had money in it or just emotions in there. So yeah, really unfortunate, but life goes on.
Yeah. Sorry, I've got my timeline a little bit wrong there. So you left Proof.
That's okay.
You moved back to Sydney and you started Housemade Hospitality. What was the reasoning behind that? Why did you make that decision?
I was in Singapore for 8 years and, got a lot out of it, met lifelong friends and my wife there, got to work on some dream projects. But I got itchy feet and, realized that Australia is awesome as a place to live and quality of life. And I just wanted to relocate back there. So I convinced my wife, but of course needed something to go back to. And one of my best mates, Justin Newton, now business partner, was forming a hospitality business with my now business partner, Scott. I was in Sydney on town for work and over a few bottles of red wine. We just kind of both had this idea that I would join this new hospitality group. Nice. That was in 2018 though. And so we did a bit of forward planning. So yeah, I did it remotely, worked on concepts and bar layouts and all the other bits and pieces in my spare time while in Singapore for two plus years. Then COVID hit. I met my wife. We had a new CEO at Proof, and I committed to stay an extra year. That became 2 years. So my relocation back to Sydney was much delayed, and we opened our first venues in 2021. I was still in Singapore. So we started the business because I needed something to come back to and have a job, but also it was a good I guess maybe off ramp you might describe it from Proof. It was a good natural thing to go to. Going to open one bar probably wasn't going to be able to, I probably wasn't able to do that at the time. So going into a larger group and scaling really quickly was a good transition. Yeah, that was always planned to be the next chapter and it's worked out well.
For anyone who's not familiar with Housemade.
Well, we had a plan to kind of do one venue every 2 years and kind of grow sustainably. But instead we opened one building at the same time. The building's called Hinchcliffe House in Sydney, right in the middle of Circular Quay. And we've got 4 venues there, actually. We've got a basement bar called Apollonia. We refer to it as a Sicilian bandits drinking den. Then we have a ground floor restaurant called Grana, super busy. Level 1 restaurant called Lana and an event space. Yeah, and it's in a beautiful heritage building from the 1860s. And we're celebrating 5 years in April and May this year. So
congratulations.
We're pretty chuffed about that.
That's a huge milestone in hospitality as the 5-year mark. Well done.
Totally. Thank you very much. We're planning some events and a new menu launch and like a series of kind of industry takeovers and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'll keep you posted.
Cool. So with Housemade, you have had growth faster than most people can think about opening another venue. I know that from the outside, success quite often looks like it's an overnight success, but can you give a little bit of context in what has gone into that and how you've managed to scale so quickly?
Yeah, for sure. Soon after we opened Hinchcliffe House, we decided that we did want to scale, and that was for a few reasons. One of the reasons is all of us at a director level, we've all worked for the big companies, and we decided we wanted to take all the things that we did like in terms of systems, processes, reporting, business intelligence. But then we wanted to learn from the aspects of those businesses that we didn't like, which was I guess, commitment to people and team development, care for the suppliers, care for the guests, care for the team that work for us, etc. And we, I guess, collectively had an ambition to start a hospitality group that didn't have a reputation for treating people poorly, to put it bluntly, and also to hopefully set a more modern standard for how we work with our suppliers and brand partners and different contractors and vendors. And that's simple stuff like, keeping up to date with accounts or looking for collaboration opportunities or not trying to rinse people on price, developing long-term relationships. And we've successfully done that. We're not perfect, of course, but we've done that. Another reason we wanted to, so that was one reason we wanted to scale, because we wouldn't be able to achieve some of those goals if we just had like 1, 2 or 3 venues. Another reason we wanted to scale is because of the opportunities it provides our team from a career perspective. For example, if we did have 1 or 2 or 3 venues, we wouldn't need centralized reservations or centralized marketing, finance, events, or group roles such as group bar managers or group sous chefs or group operations managers. And I'm really a big advocate of our industry, but people quite often say, like, what do you do in your industry? Like, where do you go? Do you own your own bar, or do you become a brand ambassador? No, there's many other kind of pathways these days, and we wanted to grow a company to be able to provide those career pathways. And some of those pathways are unexpected. Most of the people that in our guest services team have come from in-service roles. One of our designers comes from a hospitality background, but also studied graphic design. And so this was the merging of both of their worlds. And we were able to provide an opportunity which gets the best out of them. So yeah, part of that commitment to people was creating career pathways, and we wouldn't be able to do that if we were a smaller company. So yeah, they're the two main things. There's commercial benefits to it, of course, but there's also a lot of stress as well. And so just because we have lots of businesses doesn't mean like it's all roses, like you alluded to. Of course.
Could you tell me a little bit about any of those challenges that you've had while scaling?
Well, on the very specific topic of what does the impact of scaling have? Well, it takes away our attention and our resources, particularly at a director level. My business partner, Steve, is in the kitchen behind me right now at Vitelli's upstairs, which is our newest venue. And he's in the kitchen probably 5 nights a week at the moment, which probably means it takes him away from our 12 other venues. And whenever we open a new venue, we kind of go full court press. And so particularly the 3 of our directors and some of those group roles are all in service, in venue full time for at least a month for the opening. And that means we take our focus off all the other venues, and there potentially is risk for the other venues if we're not actively working on them and in them. So that's a clear risk of scaling. Just the general bandwidth and finding the time to do everything. If you want to grow or scale anything, you have, there's risk of the quality being impacted. And so I can't get around and taste every single cocktail in every venue every week, for example. That's probably going to be pretty dangerous. So yeah, there's risk of just scaling. I've tried.
I bet.
But there's definitely, So that's hazardous to your health, but there's quality risk, I suppose, once you start scaling and start growing a little bit. They're probably the biggest pressures. And then financially, to be honest, there's intercompany loans, and, one business might need some CapEx investment, so that money needs to come somewhere else. So it might come from another venue. And then, there's a lot of accounting and financial reporting and a lot of handling in that regard in terms of intercompany financial dynamics. And, that can put pressure on the business, the individual business. It can put pressure on our head office team. So yeah, there's financial pressures that are related to scaling, because a new business requires more money because it needs to phase up to profitability, and then that needs to be paid back. So there's just a burden of like further admin and then moving money around. That's probably another risk of scaling. In terms of like just general challenges, hospitality businesses are just really feeling the pinch, and I think that's a global thing. And particularly in Australia, we've got, this cost of living crisis, we've got interest rate increases, discretionary incomes dropping off. People are drinking less alcohol. Social behaviours have changed. People are going to run clubs and coffee club matcha raves or whatever instead of coming to our bars and drinking martinis.
Yeah. Can I ask you, because I
Yeah.
see this on the news a lot at the moment. And by the time this comes out, the situation will have changed. But I keep seeing about hospitality having to increase their prices because of the fuel situation in Australia at the moment. Has that affected your businesses at all? Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
It's a hot topic. So we talked about it this week. Yeah, we're looking for our suppliers. We're waiting for our suppliers to apply it. I've only seen one so far come in on an invoice. Our specialty milk supplier that provides all of our kind of nut milks and soy milk, they applied a 1.5% petrol surcharge on the invoice this week. I've heard some of our food suppliers as early as 2 weeks ago were putting on a 3% petrol or oil surcharge. So yeah, we expect that to become more common. There's some talk in the industry with a couple of lobby groups and on chat groups about us putting like oil surcharges on menus. We won't do that anytime soon, certainly. But yeah, I've told my team to look out for that, to highlight it and send it to me, because I'm also a bit skeptical around price gouging, and I want to be empathetic to our suppliers and their logistics partners. But if they're going to whack on 3% on a $5,000 invoice, it's quite meaningful for our business.
Yeah.
Where we've got tight margins already. So, yeah, we just have to expect prices are going to increase over the next 3 to 12 months because of the impact of oil, other cost of goods pressures. But yeah, no, you're right. There's already invoices coming through that have like an oil surcharge on it. And 1.5% is manageable. We want to be empathetic, but we need to monitor it and negotiate with our suppliers if it becomes too much.
Yeah, yeah. I shared a story on my socials yesterday because I had seen a news story about them recommending hospitality just whack on a 5% surcharge. I would argue that psychologically that's not going to encourage people to go out, right? If you're adding a surcharge to their bill.
Absolutely. I think that's it kind of highlights the financial pressures, and they talk about consumer confidence. In our industry, we call it guest confidence. And, if that guest comes in, has a great experience, and they get their bill and they then see there's an extra 5% because of the petrol prices, they might not even complain. They might be fine with it, but they might not go out again for another month.
Yeah.
And it could psychologically create a barrier to entry for people to go out and have a good time.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think it's probably better if it's like factored into the pricing so people don't have to think twice about it if you do need to do it, right?
Yeah, we're copying it. There's a CPI, then there's going to be a labour cost, like a minimum wage increase. So we already are copying between 3.5% to 5% increase on our cost of goods / labour cost per year. But we can't keep increasing our prices.
Yeah.
And then also our suppliers can only drop their prices so low. So it means the margin's just getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah. It's a hard time, particularly in Australia, to run a hospitality business. As an owner, you kind of touched on this, who can't be physically present in all of the venues. How do you maintain standards throughout the company?
Yeah, it's a great question. Communication and coordination is a big part of it. So we, just like everyone, have 1,000 chat groups. We rely heavily on our structured one-on-ones or WIPs or WIPs, and that's the kind of platform in which myself or other people might kind of focus on different areas, whether it's garnishing or OS&E or ticket times, and we look at data and strategize around that. So having really structured outcome-driven meetings, being really active on our chat groups and email, because we can't be everywhere, and we need to act decisively and we need to be dynamic. And so as long as people are not having their day, as long as we're doing this when people are working and not encroaching on their days off, then we need that kind of reactiveness and that high level of engagement and communication, because you're right, I can't be in every venue every day or even every week sometimes. And so, if I message Michelle, our bar leader down in Island Radio, and say, look, we've just got these reviews come in and my friend just visited the bar. He said, we have this particular product. Can we get on that? Let's fix that for tomorrow. And she'll say, she'll reply back to me saying, yes, I can do this, or I can't do this. So yeah, high degree of communication and engagement is super important. And that's a cultural piece, because some people are not as inclined as I might be in terms of being on my phone all the time and replying to messages or emails. And so we do need to set a culture of professional behaviors, which is reactive and communicative, with boundaries. I always say to my team, if you're not working, don't answer it. Don't even read it. Totally fine. But if it's one of those 5 days of the week in which you are working, and if you're in a leadership or a senior leadership position, read my message, reply back to me, tell me you can or you can't do it. Let's keep moving.
Yeah, 100% agree. I like that you say that they don't have to look at it on their days off, because there's a lot of places that expect you to reply on your days off. That's nice.
Yeah. There's a big difference between like working culture, market, or country to country. Australia has progressed a lot in terms of like workplace culture and setting boundaries and getting paid for the job that you do. It's challenging because, like I said earlier, like the really successful people are probably going to have a bit of extra hustle and just get shit done, even if they don't, even within that 40 hours or 45 hours. But yeah, we also want to protect boundaries, and also we want people to come back to work fresh and motivated and stimulated. And if I'm peppering them with silly messages about out of stock issues or garnishing or whatever, then they're not going to come back fresh. They're going to come back jaded potentially.
Yeah. Can I ask you personally about your experience as the director of the hospitality group? Have you had to make any personal sacrifices to be able to do what you do?
Well, yeah, I mean, currently right now, I can feel my wife's presence in the room somewhere. It's certainly just working a lot. Like, we've had conversations recently about ourselves and myself having to set better boundaries so we have more time for each other and more time to enrich our own lives and do stuff that's not sitting on the couch after a long day. And so certainly I think it's impacting my personal life now. If I look back in my 20s, you know, I partied a lot, I drank a lot, I went out and had a good time. But a lot of the time I was also going home and looking at vintage cocktail books. And so I think I've been pretty driven my whole career. I wouldn't say I've been career minded. Like, I've never had like a 5-year plan and I want to do this, I want to do that. I've just been fully engaged and just loved what I do. And that's probably had an impact on relationships for sure. That's had an impact on social life for sure. And that goes back to my 20s. Instead of kicking on at Revolver a couple of nights a week, I probably did pull back a little bit because I wanted to work on a classic cocktail list or something. And then 20 years later, I'm still working a lot. And now my wife's like, you know what? You need to stop working so we can go have dinner tonight. So for sure, I think that anecdotally it impacts your life outside of work, but that's a personal choice.
Yeah, I just think it's important for people to hear that as well, because it can look so like glamorous that you've got this from the outside like really successful career, but you do have to make sacrifices in order to get to that point. Would you agree?
I've got another actual example. Totally agree. And there's got to be some kind of balance. It sounds like a cliche, but I've got another example for you. I was working on a really huge, significant bar opening project in Singapore, and I won't say it, but something I'm very, very proud of, and I'd say almost career changing in some respects. And one of my good friends, Tim Phillips, had his birthday. Tim and Lynn were getting married in Byron Bay, and, you know, I had flights booked, I had an Airbnb booked to go to the wedding, and I had to pull out like a couple of days before because of the stress that I was under for this opening. And so that's a very clear, tangible example of a sacrifice that I had to make for work.
Yeah. And that's probably super heartbreaking to not be able to go. But if you're really proud, like, are you happy that you didn't go? Looking back, or do you regret it?
No,
it's hard to
I
say.
regret it for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. I definitely regret not going 100%, but I'm not confident that I'd make a different decision. I'd probably make the same decision again, unfortunately. Maybe that's just me. I didn't see it. I didn't see any other option at the time. And, you know, my wife would probably say, you know what, you're not curing cancer. It'll be okay. But at the time, it was like mission critical. I had to stay. I had to work on it. So, yeah.
So let's say that one of your venues, you have 12 or 13 venues now. If one of your venues, you notice that the culture isn't quite what you had intended for that venue to have. So let's say it's getting a little bit toxic or the service is not up to your standard. How do you go about rectifying that when you're also focusing on all the other venues at the same time?
Yeah, it's really challenging. You know, I've gone through a bit of a learning curve in the last couple of years, thanks to my business partner, Justin, on what the definition of culture is in the context of our industry. I used to think good culture was everyone's in a good mood, everybody's friendly, everyone goes for beers after work, everybody's mates. That's good culture. We high five, we get the job done. Like that's what good culture is. But now I've learned, and I believe that culture in our workplace is actually values combined with process. And that means the actual job that we do, and we all have a good culture of doing the best possible job and working for each other. So like my values dictate to me that I will do the same job if no one's looking. I will get on my hands and knees and I'll get that lemon that rolled under the fridge. I'm not just going to leave it there, because that's what the culture is at our venue or what have you. And so, if we, to your question, if we identify bad culture in a business, which means people are not applying attention to detail, or if they're not being reliable, or if they're not showcasing really great hospitality again and again and again, really consistency, then that's bad culture. We've got an issue there. What I do about it, first of all, we need to lead by example. And so we're pretty service orientated, even at a director level. Get into service. Like tonight I'll be in Fratelli's upstairs for 3 or 4 hours. And I like to think, well, I know I do. I lead by example. I move fast. I work with purpose. I demonstrate the kind of attention to detail that I expect from the team. And then I verbalize it. And I try not to be a dick about it, but I say, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. And now I need you guys to follow my lead. Mm-hmm. So leading by example is a good thing, but also then taking a coaching mentality instead of just kind of talking about why we're doing it and try to get the individual to also come to the same conclusion instead of me just forcing it upon someone. Let's have a conversation and get them to come to the same conclusion. And that might be, I'll give you an example. I'm a stickler for crossing off dockets or crossing off tickets. Okay. And I don't work on dispense, but that's what I've done. And so when I'm working in the bar here, Sophie, the bar leader, wasn't crossing off tickets and none of the bartenders were crossing off tickets. So then I jump in the bar, classic cliched meme, bar manager jumps in and causes havoc. But I jump in there and start making drinks. And then I realized we've doubled up. And so I said, okay, I'm going to use this as a learning opportunity and say this historically, this is what I've done in the bars that I've worked at. This is what I got taught is if you're on dispense, you get a ticket, you cross it off. And that tells all the other bartenders, particularly if it's quiet and you don't have an allocated dispense bartender, that someone's making those drinks to don't worry about it. Go on to something else. Mm-hmm. And so I demonstrated why, because we just wasted those drinks and used it as a bit of coaching opportunity. But then instead of saying, we are doing it like this now, said to Sophie and her team, what do you guys think about that? Do you think that is a system that we should implement? And, if they don't like it, then tell me why. We can do it differently, or we don't have to do it if you've got a good, credible reason. But typically, if they say, yeah, that's a good idea, let's do that. Great. We'll agree to it. Great. From now on, that's how we're doing it. And then that becomes the culture. We all do it the same. So, I guess instead of taking it on an authoritarian approach or just telling people, we talk about it and then we come to a conclusion together and then implement it together.
I love it. That's so good.
Yeah. It doesn't happen perfectly like that all the time, but that's the goal.
Yeah. I just want to get a little bit of context as to what you actually do for work. So as the director of a hospitality group, what does your week look like? What are you doing?
Sure. So, I've had this question a lot in my career, actually, particularly when I was at Proof. What do you actually do? So, in effect, I'm our group bars director, bars manager, and my focus board includes elevating drinking experiences across our group. It involves team development, recruitment, and culture. It includes the financial metrics and beverage revenue, whether that's looking at spend per head or spend per transaction and then strategizing around that. And then, of course, kind of group beverage revenue. And then Bev COGS, so cost of goods. So we've got a lot of detailed reporting on a weekly basis. And then I look at that and then look for areas to improve on, also report it back to my other business partners. So they're the main kind of bigger areas. And then that kind of permeates throughout the week. Lots of one-on-ones with my bar leaders, GMs, directors meetings, marketing meetings. So I'd say there's at least 10 weekly meetings per week. And then, working on new menus, working on events, meeting with suppliers, working on kind of brand activations in our venues with their brands, a fair bit of recruitment and HR related topics, constantly kind of hiring or developing team members. So there's a lot of that stuff, and a fair bit of service time at the moment. Actually, probably for the last 5 weeks, I've probably been in service probably about 15 hours a week, 10 to 15 hours a week.
Oh, nice. Just personal curiosity, what software are you using or what programs are you using to measure your costings throughout the venues?
Wow. Okay. So our POS system is a brand called BPOS. It's an Australian company. We use where do I start? We use Xero. We use a reporting software called Fathom. We use 7 Rooms. We use the Google suite of products for kind of our cloud file sharing, chat, emails. We're just starting to adopt a bunch of AI tools. Zendex we're about to bring on for kind of guest services and reservations and inbound inquiries. Yeah, I guess that's a big part of our stack, as it were.
Yeah. Hey, when we caught up last time, you had some strong reactions when we talked about AI. What are your thoughts on how to use AI well in hospitality? Because we can see it creeping into cocktail lists and copy. How are you implementing it in your business?
I think since our chat, I've even delved into it a little bit more. Look, I'm in the big scheme of things, I'm still a Luddite when it comes to technology and the world of AI specifically. So I feel a bit uncomfortable even answering that question because I don't anything. But in the context of our industry, I'm really excited about it. But I think there's probably a bit of misuse out there, which is probably detrimental to our industry. Maybe I'll wax lyrical about where I see the benefits of it, specifically in productivity and efficiencies. I really see that's going to be big. And I'm not talking about reducing headcount and not hiring human beings to do stuff. I mean, Excel sheets, or minute taking, and the benefits of note taking and then circulating those notes, then being able to look back at those notes is hard to measure in terms of productivity and time efficiency. But using AI, like I'm using a software called Granola, and then I put it into Claude, and I already have an existing template there, and it spits it back out, and then I circulate that, and that's in like a minute instead of me typing with my 2 fingers, not concentrating in a meeting and not capturing everything and then having to format it and then do everything manually and then sending it out. Instead, we can just automate all of that to the point where we can then also tag people for the things that they've been tasked with doing based upon that meetings. There's a huge opportunity in our industry to bring on AI for productivity and efficiencies and time management, because also I think our industry in particular can benefit from it, because if you look at any kind of spider graph online around which industries and which occupations are going to be impacted by AI, hospitality is pretty good. Like our industry is like relatively safe particularly if you work in service, if you create things, if you serve guests. But at the same time, our industry can have huge benefits from it because we're a service industry. I empathize with a lot of people, and particularly in our organization, that they're expected to do their reporting and do their rostering and forecasting and do new menus and work on spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff. Plus they have to do 40 hours of service or 30 hours of service. Plus they might not know how to use Microsoft Excel like me properly. And so there's pressures there, and AI can help with all of that. It can save so much time. It can do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of formatting and all that stuff. So I think for our industry, productivity and efficiencies in terms of operations. On the creative part of it, same deal. In terms of research and being able to create, like research papers, for example. We're currently working on a new menu for Apollonia to celebrate its 5 years anniversary, and the menu is going to be split into the 5 great cities of Italy. I won't name what they are because your husband might come after me. But instead of us going online for days and days and researching and putting together kind of research material and basing that to then put together our storytelling and our cocktails and whatever, we can just create really clear prompts and, briefs, put that through AI, and then it pumps out some really great information for us we take that then to go through our creative process. And of course, just using it in a very rudimentary way to replace like a Google search function just provides much better results. So I really like it for the productivity and the efficiency benefits, and then also how to integrate it into the creative process. On the flip side, some of the more problematic things that I've noticed in the industry is people relying on it too much for their creative output. I don't believe that the AI should be the creative output. It should be a tool to then incorporate into your kind of suite of tools that you're using to then be creative. But I see stuff, whether it's articles in magazines or LinkedIn posts, Instagram, I've seen some Instagram beef. And then I suspect I've seen some cocktail lists even locally that are AI generated because it just doesn't make sense. And so I think that is a very, very juvenile way of using AI. And I think kind of looking back at your Facebook updates from like 2010, going to be embarrassed by how people are using AI in 5 years from now.
I think that's a great example. I am really excited by it because I think that there's some things that you can do. One thing that I figured out how to do just yesterday was to set up a scheduled automation on my computer because I'm now managing socials for a restaurant group in Singapore. And what I've managed to set up is an automation that has nothing to do with creativity, but it goes to Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Google Ads, and scrapes all of the engagement, the views, all of that results, and puts it into a report for me without me having to go and manually do that. So that will save me hundreds of hours in the future. So things like that, I think, is such a good way to be using it, rather than getting it to write your copy for you.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to approach it. And, we've had some internal training sessions on Claude, specifically co-work function. And the demonstrations, we've got good friends of ours run a kind of really high-end kind of C-suite gym and personal trainer business. And they demonstrated what they're doing to create websites, social media strategies, and then the scheduling really relatively easy using that Copilot, and then setting out the week. And I think some of our team members are now, if they've got regular tasks that they need to do, they can rely on co-work or a similar program to actually do that for them, or at least help them do it in a much quicker, more efficient way. So I think I'm really excited about that component too.
Yeah. And I think the huge benefit for hospitality as well is that now, because of this huge surge of AI, I think whenever there's a big movement in one direction, there's also a counter movement in another direction. And I think what we're going to see more of, hopefully, is people wanting to go out and get social connection. And hopefully hospitality, particularly bars, can be the place that people go to go and get that social connection again. So I'm hoping that that positively influences the industry rather than negatively.
Totally agree. And kind of further to that point is, I've already seen a few little headlines and articles speaking about luxury being defined by old school medium and old school media. By that, I mean like menus, or, in the future, it'll be a luxury that a human being has written a piece of copy, or a human being has created a menu, or what have you. So I do think there will be this element of discernment and I guess maybe luxury or craft coming back into our world, because people are going to go too far down this AI generation process.
Yeah, I agree. So in terms of money spent or money invested in the businesses, what is the best item, so single item, that you've purchased that you think was such a great return on investment?
You can see my little ball spinning as I'm thinking about this. Because the cogs. Unfortunately, I just go straight to the things that we overspent on, to be honest.
That's the next question.
I would say maybe, good. I've got a few answers for that.
Okay.
Where was a really good use of investment? I'm just going to kind of quickly go through venues.
It's fine.
Look, I think music equipment, speakers, subs, and a really good integrated system to get the best acoustic quality. I think that's a good use of money, and lighting as well. I couldn't tell you how much or what the investment in total is, but certainly I think that is where you have the biggest tangible and sensorial outcome from the investment that you make, like really good lighting and really good acoustics. It's hard to beat. The other thing would maybe be our Taylor slushy machine, which ironically is just broken down this week, but it's like a 20,000 AUD. Yeah, it's a really expensive slushy machine, but yeah. It's just a weapon. During summer down at Bondi, we could do 200 liters of slushy per week, and so it just churns it out, pun intended. So that was a good investment at the time.
Amazing. That's a great answer. People love a slushie. What was the worst money that you've spent?
I probably think on some of the materials that we've used in the venues, like the overuse of expensive stone or marble. There's probably like light fixtures and whatnot that we probably just overspec. We love, like my business partners and I really like interior design, and in my consultancy days with that consultancy hat on, I get the privilege to work with big budgets that use some of the world's best interior designers with like crazy furniture and materials. But for us, it probably wasn't a good use of our money to spend it on expensive light fixtures or expensive marble. It deteriorates too quickly, and I don't think it's probably the most important thing. I'm a big advocate in interior design and how that impacts the guest experience and the business model and how it makes people feel. But I'm not sure if expensive marble in our venues was needed.
Yeah, great answer. So you said lighting was both the best and the worst. Lighting, getting it right is the best, but the fixtures themselves not as important? Or
yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. When I say the lighting, I probably mean the investment in an expert to come and program the system, the kind of light bulb, the settings, the time investment, as well as the financial investment. You know, like there's extra money in, like, if we want to punch through a wall to put some wiring through because we need to have a light on the other side, there's a fair bit of money wrapped up in the process. Least of money could be is on the actual physical fixture. Sometimes I think simple is best. So for example, I won't move the screen, but I'm in our private dining room, which we just redid recently. And I'm pretty sure the three, I think they're plastic, but they look like they're brass, these chandeliers. I think I got them from Temu or Temu adjacent. And they do the job.
Yeah. Okay, I love that. That's great advice. What is the most you've ever been in the weeds?
Financially or like in service?
A pig. Whatever's going to give the best story.
I would probably say it's back in my consultancy days. We took on some ambitious projects.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was times where we just had a lot of projects and a lot of expectations, and it just became really overwhelming. Like opening the Raffles, there was a lot of pressure there. Atlas, there was a fair bit of pressure on us internally and externally. Big projects, big budgets, family businesses, a lot of pressure there. That was sometimes stressful. I remember being on site at the Four Seasons in Seoul. It was a brand new hotel, $500 million hotel, and Chris Lauder was running the program. We recruited him from New York City, and there was 10 people in the hotel pre-opening, and Chris and I were two of them, and we had 11 outlets to open in like a 2-week period. And I remember like Chris and I I think it was crazy. It was like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. and Chris was still tinkering around with this like Manhattan recipe, and I was just like, mate, it's done. It's good enough. Let's go. And then he pulled out a bottle of Dom Perignon that a supplier dropped off, and he cracked this bottle of Dom, and we drank it there, and we just kind of like traded war stories. And I said to him, like, this is actually one of the hardest and most intense projects I've ever been in. And we both just kind of agreed that, but also agreed that like it's going to be fine. Like in a month's time, it'll be fine. In 2 weeks, it'll be fine. Like we're just going to get it done. So yeah, we certainly were in the weeds with a couple of those big projects because that was pretty much because of the complexity and the scale of them. I'm trying to think of when I was really in the weeds last in service. I think our venues run pretty well, so nothing too crazy.
What a flex.
Yeah. I can't think of any times where we were like absolutely getting pumped. I think New Year's Eve, I jumped behind the bar at Martinez for a couple of hours, and that was like 5 deep and 10 across. So yeah, we were getting pumped there, but as a bartender, you kind of love it.
Under control.
And yeah, in terms of financially in the weeds, I don't know if I'm comfortable going there, to be honest.
That's fine.
We've got loans, we've got business partners, we've got shareholders. Yeah. Not gonna touch that.
That is okay. We can skip that. What is the highlight of your career been?
I'm fortunate enough to probably have a bit of a highlight reel. I mean, for myself, I don't mean like that for the public, but I'm just consider myself very fortunate to be able to work on some amazing projects with some amazing people. So I think maybe the top ones would be Atlas. Really was a dream project to work on. It was very stressful, of course, but the people, Vicky and Vincent, who are the owners of Atlas, they were just amazing to work with, close friends of ours now. And just the scale and the prestigious nature of that project was really cool. And plus, I really got to flex with my teammates, of course, on all the different elements of it. So yeah, it's famous for being a huge gin collection, and it's famous for being this crazy, beautiful design. But it's all the little details, which I'm really proud of. The lapel pin, the jacket, the glassware, the music. I did all the music initially, the table dimensions, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm quite proud of that as a project. I think having my own gin, Widger's Gin, as the official gin of the Singapore Sling for many years was definitely a career highlight. As someone who is a bit of a cocktail history geek, having your gin with your face on it being the house gin of an iconic cocktail like the Singapore Sling was definitely something really special, which, even though it's not the current house pour there, it's going to be on the record for, hundreds of years into the future. So I'm quite proud of that.
That's cool.
Opening Housemade Hospitality with my business partners, obviously that's a big career highlight. At Housemade Hospitality, as recently as 6 weeks ago, we had to close a venue and it was my concept. Obviously everybody contributed to it, but a lot of it did come from me. We had a venue called Baptist Street Rec Club, and it was part neighborhood bar, part cocktail bar. There was a bit of a pub element to it, and we traded for a year, and it was really busy on the weekends, and everybody loved it, but it just wasn't working financially, and it was putting too much stress on our whole business. And so we had to close it down and reopen it as a restaurant called Vitelli's upstairs, which I also had a huge influence on, which I'm really proud of. But yes, that was the first time that a bar that conceptualized and then opened had to close. And I probably haven't reflected on it enough because we were so busy, and you just really don't have time to be too sad about these things. But yeah, there was mixed emotions that we had to close that. I wouldn't call it a low light because we're fine. I'm fine. Everyone's fine. We had to spend a fair bit of money. We lost a fair bit of money. But yeah, that's sad that a venue that I conceptualized had to shut down.
Yeah.
So yeah, that wasn't ideal.
I think that's really good for people to hear as well, because for you being somebody who's already had so many venues, to have one that you've opened after the success of other venues and still have one that doesn't work financially can show people that if their first one didn't work, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily a bad operator. It might have just been the wrong place, the wrong time, the wrong concept, whatever that might be. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad business person.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I still back myself in this industry and coming up with good bar concepts and building teams and programs for sure. There's just lessons to be learned from that, and hindsight. We have the benefit of hindsight, of course, but yeah, it is what it is. We learn from those mistakes and we write again, so to speak. And you just have to take a really pragmatic view of it, because at the end of the day, we've got a lease here, we've got people that work for us, we've got suppliers that, all these people in part depend on us. Personally, I've got, a personal guarantee here. So there's a bit of emotion there and, a bit of sadness, but then you've got to move on pretty quickly because of all those reasons that I just mentioned. So I'm totally fine with it, to be honest. I really enjoy the chat. I really, to be honest, don't enjoy talking about myself, but I've enjoyed this conversation. Yeah, congrats to you. If you guys, speaking about venues and transitioning out of your own business, your story is quite interesting and unique, and I just love seeing what you're doing in this kind of content creator education space, and you've clearly got a few other things going on as well. Again, it demonstrates that even more so now in kind of a social media age and content creation age, that there is so many different pathways that people can take within our industry. And I think that's really important. So kudos to you for demonstrating.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's, my career now is, I didn't even know that what I'm doing now is possible to do as a career or as a job. It's nothing that I would have ever thought about when I was younger. I always thought that a hospitality career was pretty linear, and there was maybe 3-4 different directions that you could go in, and one was bar owner, one was brand ambassador, one was consultant. I don't even know what the fourth one was. To me,
sales rep maybe.
Yeah. To me, it's such a much bigger, broader world, and it's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Thank you. Hey, Jason, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy work week to talk for an hour and a half. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.